And I will call this meeting to order. This meeting is called to order on December 13th at 2012. The current time is 9:04. Has the items been duly noticed?
Yes, we are in compliance.
Okay. Now to the compliance with the open meeting law. Public comment during this portion of the agenda is limited to matters on the agenda for action. If you wish to be heard, give your name for the record. The amount of discussion as well as the amount of time any single speaker is allowed may be limited. Is there anybody here? I don't see anybody for a public comment. We'll move to agenda item number 4. Possible action for approval of the final minutes by reference of the regular meeting of the September 25, 2012. I don't believe those meeting minutes were sent out.
I don't know.
My understanding is that they were.
They were.
They were? Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
The other deputy that
Because I never personally received a copy of them.
Would you like to
Do I hold
obey
it?
the item and then you
That-
can review them in the next meeting? we can-
That's what I was going to make that recommendation, if that would be fine, because but you received a copy of it, Bob? The minutes?
I have to stand on the 5th.
I don't read my emails.
We'll go ahead and we'll hold this item in abeyance till the next meeting, and we'll do this meeting and that meeting at the same time.
Can we take a motion on that?
Okay, yes, could I have a
I so
motion?
move.
Second.
Okay, I have a first and a second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed, that item passes. Report from the Director of Building and Safety on the fee increases.
Was it 2010? We had conducted a fee study, and at the time we conducted the fee study, the gap in our fees identified by our consultant was 65%, which was way too hefty of an increase for us to be able to expect the industry to absorb in one bite. We actually set our target a little lower at 50%, thinking that over time, through CPI increases and efficiencies that we're still looking for in the department, we can make that 10% up. So it was agreed with industry that we would increase our fees by 50%, starting with 25% in the year 2011, another 15% in 2012, followed by a final 10% in 2013. As a part of the City Council's review and in the ordinance adopting those fees, there was a requirement that before the fees could be implemented, the building official needed to report to the Enterprise Committee the financial status and the financial performance of the department. We've been giving you up-to-dates. We've met back in May and in September, I believe it was, and we gave you reports on that, but this is specifically to fulfill that requirement, this meeting. I have given you an 8-page status report of the building department fund and our performance, and I apologize. It was my intent to get it out to you ahead of time to allow you time to read it. I certainly don't expect you to read that now, and it may be necessary to have an additional meeting in January. It is my intent that February 1 of 2013, we would implement the 15% fee increase. We held off on implementing the fee increase as it was scheduled in July of this year because in March I had discussions with the city manager. The building industry was beginning to show some signs of recovery from the economy, and in order not to restrict or mitigate that recovery, we decided to defer the fee increases to a later date, and that is the February 1 date. We've tried to hold off on fee increases as much as possible, but the performance of our budget kind of and a review of our time in inspections, times in plan review, and are our fees covering the costs of that? The answer is no, it's not. I think that, I got to remember the numbers now. You'd think I'd know them right off the top of my head. But starting on page 5 of this report, it talks about department performance on services provided, talks about our building inspections and our holdovers, and then on page 6, the second paragraph begins to talk about how much what we've done with to the industry with our inspection holdovers. We estimated a cost, an average cost of between $500 to $1,000 a day for each holdover. Now, we understand that on some projects, that because of financing, land costs, construction, loans, labor, contractors holding, some of those may be too low, some of those may be too high. We have just picked, actually, 500 to 1,000. That came from statements that I had heard from home builders that it cost me $500 a day for a house on average every time you hold me over. Commercial, we figured, was about 1,000. If you had several homes under construction, it would easily be $1,000. So when we looked at that and the number of holdovers we're having, our inability in the past 2 years to meet performance measures of inspections, next day inspections when they're called in and they're expected, we have caused about a $15 million expense to the industry itself. For us in our budget performance, I think that's in the section before, is on page 4. It begins, a critical question besides the overall budget performance is how is the 25% increase fee performing on our various permits. And when you look at building permits, 57% of our building permits that we issue, the fees were sufficient to cover the costs of inspections. 43% were not. The fees that were insufficient had an average cost range of 7 to 19% over the amount of fee paid. The reason we're given a range on that is we're basing the remaining costs of those inspections on those permits that do not have sufficient funds to cover it. We look at what required inspections are left, and we can cost those at using a half hour per inspection and $160 an hour, which is our base rate. However, we have a 12% failure rate on our inspections, so we added 12% to it. So you get, if you did straight inspection costs on the required inspections and assuming they 100% passed, it would be a 7% shortfall. If you put in the 12% failure rate, it'd be 19%. So the 15% fee will get us very close to the 19% for the year 2013, hopefully. Plan reviews show that 28% of our plans reviewed between January 1 of 2012 and November 30th, 2012. Actually, the plan review fees cover the cost of the time allotted for that review, and 17% of the plan reviews require more time for review than the original plan check fee covers. The plan review fee that had fees that were insufficient were 36% more cost above the actual time. Now, when we did this, this is a straight calculation of time only. If you'll remember, we started tracking time on our inspections. How long does it take to do a sheet and shear? How long does it take to do this? And we have cumulative times for each permit. And we have begun to, when a project goes over the allotted time that the fee allows, to charge additional fees for that time. However, we would prefer to have you pay one fee and get your inspections and not have to pay any more money. The fees at the end saying you're using more service than your fees entitle you to, only invite conflict between contractors saying it's your fault, not our fault, and that kind of thing. And we would only like to do that in the extreme cases and not use that as a revenue generator to not allow the increase in fees. So when you get into those things, the direct services and the amount of time we put into those direct services, the fees do not cover them. That does not include all of the administrative costs, the clerical support, the overhead things that go into the cost of doing business as a department. And that's where you have to look at the overall performance of the budget. And Yolanda, on this little 8.5 by 11 sheet, has provided some performance beginning in 2009, which was, I came on board in June of 2008, so 2009 was my first fiscal year to be in the department. And as you'll see by the first paragraph, the end of fiscal year 2008, we were $3.2 million in the hole, and by the end of fiscal year 2009, we were $123,491 in the black. That was a net income of 1%. Fiscal year 2010 was $68,645,000 surplus of our revenues over our costs, and again, that was 1%. Fiscal year 2000, ending 2011, we really had a banner year and went up to 3% surplus of revenues over costs of $248,199. The fiscal year budget for 12 showed a minus. That was the budget itself. Showed us at a loss of $197,695 shortfall of revenues over expenses, a minus 3%. Actual was ended up a minus 27%, and there are several reasons for that. Reasons that we've already discussed at this committee. The government administration costs increased from 10% to 21% of our labor, of our wages and salaries. The benefit ratio for the charges for employee benefits increased, I think, 38%. And then we also took $1.2 million and put it into deferred income. And when we changed our accounting method, there was a one-time hit on our revenues that drove us down in fiscal year 2012. The projections for fiscal year budget 2013 is a 15% budgetary shortfall of $1,157,000. If you and then year to date, we are at 3%, minus 3%. We're halfway through the year, or just short of a month short of halfway through the year, and that's where we're at right now. So we're hoping to manage to where that 15% is not realized. And then Yolanda has done projections for fiscal year 13, 14, and 15, both with the 10% fee increase and without the 10% fee increase. And you can see the dramatic difference between the fee increases and the amount of overage on our revenues. Clearly, the 15% alone will not put us into a financially stable situation, nor do I believe that the 15% this year and 10% next year, which we will be looking at, will put us in a financially stable condition. There are other things that we are looking at, utilizing those contractors that do not manage their projects well, that utilize more service than their fees pay for, should be paying additional revenues. We are looking at ways in our inspection area to become more efficient. example of inspections that require certifications to be given to us, yet we conduct the inspections anyway. And the question is being asked, well, can we just accept the certifications and cut the cost of our inspections and rely on those who are certifying to us that the product is installed correctly to be responsible for it. Plan review times, we need to manage our plan review times more efficiently. I think that the standard of expectation for our plan reviewers has been you take the time that's necessary to do a good plan review, and I think that that work has expanded to time allotted, and I think we need to cut back on the allotment of time for plan reviews for our plan reviewers and get more efficient. So internally, we will be doing things to provide greater efficiencies, but neither just a straight increase in our fees will solve our problem. It has to be a combination of how we conduct our business, how we manage those that demand more service than what they're paying for, and then the fees in combination with that. The other thing, the reason that we chose to go 50% instead of 65% is that the state statute allows for annual increases based on consumer price index. Well, the consumer price index for several years has been negative, and it was no help. Once this consumer price index becomes a positive figure, the fees can increase over time in very small, palatable amounts to help us stabilize those fees. So that right now is our strategy. I know there is an issue with our operating reserve, and if you take a look at the sheet that Yolanda has given you, our operating reserves for fiscal year 13 are projected to be, with no fee increase, at about 25%. State statute allows 50%. The projection is right now it might be at 37 because we're not losing money to the level that we are expecting to. Fiscal year 13 with a 15% increase would be 41%, but without it, it would go to 17. And then fiscal year 14 would be at 31%, and fiscal year 15 we would be at 18%. So we are utilizing the operating reserves to help with income or revenue shortfalls in the department. And hopefully by past the year 2015, which I honestly can't see past, we would be able to have created more efficiencies and done things that would help us to stabilize our revenues. So at this point, based on that report to you, I wanted to let you know it is our intent that come February 1 of 2013, we would be increasing our fees by 15%. We will send an industry advisory out in January of 2013, advising industry of this. I have spoken with the home builders, the AGC, American Institute of Architects, Plumbing, Heating, and Contractors Association, ABC Contractors, which is the non-union contractor association, and a number, NAIOP, who was present at the last council meeting where we adopted the fees objecting. They understand the need for the fees. They understand what's happened to our budget, and none of them, as I would expect, are happy about it, but they understand the need for it. So that's basically where we're at, and that's basically the report. I have given you an 8-page report, as I said. Please read it. If you have questions, if you have issues with it, after this meeting, feel free to call me, talk to me about it, and if you feel necessary, we can schedule a meeting in January to discuss this issue further. I want the Enterprise Fund Committee comfortable with why we have to do these fees. I don't expect you as industry representatives to agree with it with a big smile on your face, but the whole thing is about helping to understand what's really happening to our department.
You know, Chris, on the 12% failure rate on inspections, is, how would you determine it? That's just, you're taking every inspection and, you know, basically here's what failed out of.
Yeah, it's every reason in the world. It's canceled inspections, and some inspections where they called for the inspection, they weren't ready, or the work quality was not up to code. So it's a combination of all of those. And the reason for the several, even partial passes are in that, because if we give you a partial pass, we still have to come back. It's another trip, and it's an expense to the department. So we were looking at, you know, what percentage of our inspections generate another inspection, and that's about 12% for various reasons.
May I comment on that?
Yes.
What we find in the field is an awful lot of partial inspections, just because of the particular aspects of the job. I mean, it's not uncommon to get 3, maybe 4 drywall partials, just because, you know, everybody wants it yesterday. And so you're moving fast, and the only way you can move reasonably fast
Part of it done.
is with the inspector cooperating, and that's on partials. So I think that's really critical to, I'm sorry to see that's a 12%, but I'm saying from the field standpoint, it's really important to continue to have those partials
I would,
and have the support of the inspectors to allow that.
I agree wholeheartedly with you, and I would prefer to see our failed inspection rate more at 8% or less than 10%. And because I agree, Bob, you know, I had a discussion yesterday with one of my managers, and he looked at me and said, "What is a partial pass?" And he said, "When I was in school, I either passed or failed." And I said, "Well, it's a measure of courtesy that we give to contractors to let them, you know, what portions of their work meet code, we pass that, but it's not all of the drywall. It's a part of the drywall, so that they can continue to progress their projects." And Bob, I think you said it very well, that it's a courtesy that the department extends to allow for portions of the project, you know, half your drywall to get done, you get a partial pass on your drywall because there's one drywall inspection for the entire project.
And and so, and it might be partial electrical, it just, when you're
Right.
moving fast and you got a fairly
Right.
good-sized job, you can't, it's really detrimental to get that entire project to that point where I can call for one inspection, so
Yeah,
I'm
it
wondering.
doesn't make sense.
From anybody, obviously from you, but I'm wondering if we couldn't have a designation for a partial rather than a fail, whether, so it goes into that category.
Yeah.
And I would surmise that contractors would be prepared to pay for a partial like they do for a same day. I mean, it's worth substantial amount of money to be able to continue to move in an expedited manner. Then I got to wait a week and a half before I can get my final drywall or my final electrical before I can start closing up, where I'm
Yeah.
closing up in this half or this quarter, and I'm moving. I've got production, I've got people being, in every trade being productive, whereas if we have to wait and get a full, it significantly impacts that schedule. And I can't say that I've seen a schedule that, whether you put it in a critical timeline, how you do it, if you don't get partials, you're never going to finish that job
Never gonna get it.
in that allocated schedule.
Well,
Never.
I believe a lot of that has to do with the relationship that has formed with the contractor and the inspector.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're a bad contractor and he can't trust you and you don't do what you say you're going to do and you don't do quality work, he's not going to give you that.
Exactly.
But what I'm saying is, if he does give you that, as a contractor, it's worth it to the job to pay for a partial.
I will tell you that I'm having discussions right now about as long as you're talking about drywall and partials, one-side drywall. Some of our inspectors allow their contractors to one side, others don't. You can't touch the drywall until you've got your rough electrical, rough plumbing. I think as a matter of policy, we're going to start allowing one-side drywall, period.
We always request it.
Yeah.
You gotta ask.
You gotta ask
We
for
always
it, and I
request
think that it's something that we're going to allow without you having to ask. The only thing you gotta ask is which side of the wall, the inspector, which side of the wall will you
You
allow
want.
to be one-sided? So I think that is an effort on our part to continue to partner with contractors to progress their jobs and to keep working while they resolve inspection issues and those kinds of things.
Just throw something out there and Bob might appreciate that. I know on projects that we do, I don't have the architect put sound insulation in the walls.
Right.
I'm going to put it in, but this way I can save a day without calling for
I
an
think the
inspection.
attorney's going to tell you you've gotten off subject.
Yeah, I was gonna, I kind of let it go a little bit more than I thought it would go, but we may need to kind of just
Yeah, okay.
maybe
We're just-
bring it into the
Yeah,
increase of
okay.
fees, you know?
Those kinds of things do affect our ability to give service, which impacts the fees that we charge and impacts our costs. So we are just, and those are the things that I was talking about at greater efficiencies to cut our costs down and help the contractors and the things that we do that aren't necessary to do that cost us money.
I have a question for council. Is this document public? In
Yes.
other words,
Yes, it is now.
Yes.
then we can present it to our different organizations.
This document is now part of the public record.
Okay.
We submit to the clerk, she'll stamp it in, and it is part of the public record.
I would ask that we make one change before it goes public, and that's on page 2, fiscal year
Yeah.
2021.
See, I don't claim to be the best typist.
I understand, but I'm saying,
It's 2012 instead of 121.
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
I don't think we'll be alive by that one.
And I don't know if we'd be able to vote on
It just shows I'm
this.
not thinking about retirement.
At this point, I don't know if we'd be able to vote on this because we haven't had sufficient time to review the document at this point.
We're really just accepting his report. So it really isn't, I guess you agreeing with the content, it's just the fact that he made the report about why we need to increase the fees. You're
Okay.
accepting the report. And then if you want to maybe have another discussion in January about
The details.
the details of it, then we can.
Okay.
Sure.
Excuse me, I don't know if we have to vote on the increase.
You don't.
No. This is just,
It's already
this is just his,
Informational only.
correct. You're just accepting his report.
It was
to you
fulfilling the
as
requirements of the ordinance
Right.
that I would come back and
It's
tell
not
you
an
what was
action item
happening.
for us
Right.
to,
It's not necessarily an action item, no.
No.
I do have a question regarding, obviously, your position is it's necessary, okay? Given that, how do we stack up with the other jurisdiction fees? I mean, that always comes into play, and I presume that may or may not have been bounced around at the council meeting, but for the record, do we have a feeling of what the other jurisdictions are doing through hearsay? Or do we know exactly where we stand today based upon these increases
We are-
relative to theirs?
Yes, we do, and we looked at that when we did the initial fee study, and with the 50% increases, the position we would be in is we would still be lower than those required in the city of Henderson. We would be slightly higher than Clark County, though you mentioned by way of the grapevine, I understand that Clark County is preparing some fee increases themselves, and we are still higher than the city of North Las Vegas. So we would sit in number 2 position of the highest fees in the valley.
That's with our 50%
That's what the
But-
full 50%.
that we've got current, not this additional 15 and 10?
That would be with the additional 15. and
Okay,
10.
so we were 25 and now we're 50?
Yes.
Okay. That's always going to come up.
Yes, I know, and I've also sent emails out asking for similar performance measures of the other jurisdictions to find out how they're performing. I have to make a presentation on this. Actually, it's a presentation on what we've done in our departments to council on January 23rd, at which time this document will get converted into what's called a city manager information report. It'll get refined a little bit to fit that format. And the council will be informed by the city manager information report that we are going to be increasing fees in February. In my presentation in January, that will also be a part of it. And I know at that time, just like it is here, those questions are going to come up. How do we compare to other jurisdictions?
So we're going to increase 15% in February of 2013, and then when does the 10% go in 2014?
I would anticipate waiting at least 1 year and
So
look at
probably
February
February.
14, which has actually delayed the fees over a year beyond what we thought we would have to do.
And a lot could happen in that year.
And a lot could happen. If volumes increase, if things got better, you just don't know.
Not to mention they come back and bang us again on our benefits.
Right.
That is outrageous.
Or the federal government goes over the fiscal cliff and everything goes to pot.
Let's talk about that briefly. I don't know if that, based upon his statement, I think that's germane.
That's fine.
What do we anticipate of an impact in practicality or theory if that does occur, and to your department?
To my department, when you look at the document that is the, oh geez, now the word escapes me, the bill that was passed, that is sequestration bill, and you look at the number of things that spending cuts in, several of those could impact construction and could impact housing and will seriously impact the economy. And I'm not an economist, so I don't know what the overall impact is.
Okay, but
I know
there's nothing in that bill that specifically impacts your
No.
operating
It would
ability.
all be-
It's clearly representative of the economy.
It would be a domino
Okay.
theory that would get to us. The other issues out there is what will our home building market be for the next year. I think the home builders, Nat Hodgson, the executive director of the home builders, is saying that he believes it will be very comparable to what we had this year. And if you look at our holdover issue, it was the increase in single-family homes that has created the holdover issue. And we don't segregate residential inspections from commercial. We have combination inspectors that are doing the same. So when one aspect of the industry impacts us, it impacts into both aspects with our inspections and the costs associated with those. So we don't know what the foreclosure market is actually going to do, whether it is going to become stronger, or if banks have taken all the hit with foreclosures they intend to take, and they're working on other measures to keep people in their homes, or if there will be another flurry. There is a shadow market, we believe, of over 100,000 homes out there in the valley that if it hits, it could severely impact new construction, which is the primary basis of our revenues. So there are a couple of unknown factors we just don't know.
Fire sprinkler systems, I think you guys set a cap at X number before you were going to implement, and I think that was 5,000 or 10,000?
It was 10,000 in a calendar year.
10,000 in a calendar year within the city?
No,
Or within the valley?
Within the region.
Okay. What was the number this year?
About 6,000.
Okay, so we still got a ways to
We've
go.
got a ways to go.
because that's going to impact, cost, availability, and your inspections.
Right.
Don't they kick in automatically anyway after a certain period of time?
No, after a certain period of time, the agreement we had with the home builders is if we have not reached the 10,000 threshold by the year 2015, we would reopen discussions on going ahead and requiring residential sprinklers. It's not a given that that would happen, but
Okay.
it certainly would start the conversation over again.
Now, Chris, is there a, because I don't do residential, is there a requirement that the fire department has if the home's over 5,000 square feet or 8,000 square feet, that it's mandatory?
Yes.
Fire sprinklers?
That requirement exists.
Okay.
And what's that threshold?
5,000 square feet.
5,000,
It's in
just
the-
like buildings.
It's in the building code, yes.
Okay.
Or it's not in the building code, it's in the fire code.
Okay. And the one other thing that you brought up that got my attention is the possibility of looking out down the road of documented potential back charges to contractors that might not, they're delinquent on they call for an inspection, they fail, they call again, they fail. And have you looked at any type of mechanism, how you're going to track that, or will the city attorney be doing that?
No, right now, we're doing it based on our time accounting, because our inspectors put the time in for travel time to and the amount of time on the site. When you utilize more inspections, and if you pay $160, that entitles you to 1 hour of inspection time. When you exceed that 1 hour, and we track it every day, we have a cost tracking mechanism, then we begin to charge those additional. We let them know and say, look, you've used up all your building permit fees, we're going to charge you more money. Before we'll give you a final inspection, you've got to pay it. There is another way to do it that I'm looking at that becomes a percentage of the fee, and it has a better threshold of, it contemplates that so many inspections will fail. And like if we have a 12% failure rate, when you hit 13%, maybe you pay 1% of the inspection of the building permit fee, and as you go to a higher percentage of failure rate, you pay a higher percentage of the building. I'm looking at that to try to find a more equitable way to price that out, rather than arguing about, well, you didn't spend that much time, there's no way, that guy's not, he's padding his nose, all that stuff, that we do it based on the number of failed inspections.
Yeah, 'cause that's, I looked at a very slippery slope was to.
It is.
We see it as contractors, BCs back to the subs. So it's always a fight.
And there's no way you're going to avoid the fight, because no one wants to pay more money. But seriously, if they're utilizing more service than their fees entitle them to, they should pay more. And those contractors that don't utilize more service than their fees entitle them to should not be penalized with an increase in fees as a result of that. So that's why we look at it as we have a structural issue with our fees now, that we believe that going ahead and implementing that 50% that was agreed upon will help to resolve. And then we have other issues with, there's a percentage of our customers that are less than genuine, that we need to manage them better, so that those that we don't need to manage don't have to pay for higher fees.
Do you have a process for a cursory inspection, i.e., I've got an issue in the field and the plan says one thing and the situation doesn't really allow that, so it's like, okay, I really need to know how the inspector wants me to handle that, not uncommon?
Sometimes
Because usually I call that and I get a fail because I don't know how else to call it.
if we're having difficulties and an inspector doesn't know how to deal with the situation, we will send a supervisor on to the site. And remember that when I talked about how our fees were performing on our inspections and our plan reviews, that didn't include overhead. Well, it didn't include the administration of those supervisors and the time that they spend doing that very kind of thing. And that's usually who conducts that is if we're having a conflict in the field and someone really doesn't know how to handle it, an inspection supervisor will come and handle that. Their time is reflected in the fees, but it's not tracked in how we're performing with in the write-up.
They're
It's
just
not a
part of the
that.
overhead.
They're part of the overhead.
Okay, so do we make a motion on this?
Just to accept Chris's report.
Okay, do I have a motion?
So moved.
A second? Okay, the vote, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed? None, so that is approved to move forward at this point.
And Mr. Chairman, if you want to discuss this, I guess at another time, there's more of a content once you read it.
The final draft.
The-
just prior to
Yeah,
the-
if you will let me know as you read it, if you have issues that I can answer, I'll just answer them for you. But if you feel that it's important to have another meeting of the Enterprise Fund Committee to discuss that report in further detail, we can schedule
Or if
something.
we
at a
see
later date.
anything, we'll go ahead, because we all have each other's
Right.
emails and send out the...
Be careful of that.
Okay.
No, because of the open meeting law, that would be considered, to be kind of a string,
Okay.
discussion that you're having about a particular item that needs to be discussed in public.
Gotcha.
So if you do have questions for Chris, let's just put it on for an agenda item and maybe just ask him those questions in January once you've had a chance to look it over.
So we would do this prior to the 23rd, so sometime around the,
Yes.
The 12th. And that would give you...
So if you let me know by the end of this month, we can schedule something.
And you'll make that correction and redistribute? Because I would like to
Yeah.
make this available
Yes.
to my organizations. Because I'm sure I read parts of it quickly, but I'm sure that it's very informative. I like the historical perspective. Chris is very efficient and documents it well, and that's the sales document.
That's it.
I'm certainly not going to distribute that.
No.
Okay, moving along, we've heard item number 5, the report from Chris. Item number 6 is citizen participation. There are none.
Well, I have one item, real quick.
Yes.
Under citizens' participation, about 2 weeks ago, I presented my vision for the department to my staff. Staff always want to know where the director's taking the department, what's he trying to get done, and how's he trying to accomplish it. So I put together a PowerPoint presentation and presented it to staff. This will be the basis of my presentation in January to the council. It'll get revised to fit that venue, but I've asked Carrie to send this vision statement for your information out to you guys through email. So when you get it, take a look at it, and it will help you to understand where I'm going and what I'm trying to get done.
I'll ask counsel.
Yes.
I don't know how germane this is to this agenda, but as we're talking, I'd like to ask a specific question regarding plan check items.
So that's fine. Under the public comment section.
Okay. What's the situation with demo and asbestos reports? Are you guys requiring a asbestos report on any demolition? Because many times I get feedback where if it's a clean, pristine demolition plan and you're looking for a demolition permit, I need a asbestos report. If the demolition plan is incorporated into the complete set of architectural documents for the complete TI, it seems like that's not an issue. So I'm kind of confused.
I think we look at the and I'll have to confirm this, but I think we look at the age of the building and whether or not the potential for asbestos to be there is there. If we have any inclination that there could be asbestos in the building, we require an asbestos report. If the building has been built in recent years and being remodeled, there's no need for an asbestos report. We know it's not there. So that's the best answer I can give you right now, but I'll look into it and give you a...
You know, it would be nice to know
More
that if some threshold, if it's 78 or 72 or 81, something, so,
Right.
because I get, when I'm talking to a client,
You
I
don't
don't
wanna
really
hit
know
it.
what the rule is, he looks at me
Yeah.
like, well, you're the expert, why don't you know? I don't know.
Costing it. No, I understand.
It's very subjective right now.
Okay, yeah, we'll do
It's
that.
True.
it's tough to give the client even what's the permits going to cost? We have to use an allowance.
Well, it depends upon who you're, no,
Strike that.
strike that.
But we don't know whether we need to, obviously, time is money. Do I need a report?
Right.
That's money and that's time. If I
Right.
don't need it, I don't want to go through the process. But then, if if you think you need it, then you go do it. But if you think you don't need it, and you don't do it, then you go to submit, and all of a sudden, now
need it,
you're
now you gotta go
down
get it.
2-week delay.
Right, understood. And I can guarantee you, if the house was built in 1953, you're going to need it. But
Yeah.
what is the cutoff point?
Yeah, is it an 81?
Right. I'll find
Somewhere
that
in the
out.
early 70s. I believe.
Yeah, but it'd be nice to know, then you just go to the assessor site and get a feel for when it was built, and yes or no, pretty clear cut.
Good question.
Is there any more citizen participation? Seeing none, this meeting's adjourned.